560 The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560 The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. You know, people scratching their heads, and I've been one of them until recently, about why FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried has been doing all of these media appearances, despite the fact he's clearly under criminal investigation. Against advice of counsel, I'm sitting down with you, George Stephanopoulos, New York Times, and that's a risable Sorkin fellow. And then the Wall and then the Wall Street Journal interview this weekend. So why is he doing it?
To act like a victim. I don't know, to try and get public sympathy. I can't think of any.
Maybe to influence a jury.
Oh.
It's because, you know, what he wants to convey, what he is conveying, is that this was a result of mismanagement and a lack of attention paid to the details by him. In fact, the headline in the Wall Street Journal interview over the weekend, which is incredible, FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried says he can't account for billions sent to Alameda. Remember, this is Alameda Research, the hedge fund companion of FTX. The subhead, entrepreneur says he had little insight into workings of trading firm, even though he owned 90% of it. Now, you would look at that and say, well, that doesn't sound like very positive press. But there's a big difference between being seen as incompetent or negligent versus being seen as the Harold Hill of the crypto sector. And maybe that's the point here. I was asleep at the switch, but it wasn't intentional. And he's got perhaps more positive and sympathetic coverage than he otherwise deserves because of his effective altruist propaganda and his $40 million to the Democrat socialists. Now, somebody who is stripping all of that away is David Morris, who is a columnist for CoinDesk. Now, CoinDesk is an information platform for, you know, crypto nerds and people that want to transform the financial system. He is a holder of, per his byline, holds Bitcoin, Ethereum, and small amounts of other crypto assets. So he's a believer. He's not somebody like outside the sector saying, I told you so about the sector or even about SBF. Listen to what he says. In the weeks since Sam Bankman-Fried's cryptocurrency empire was revealed to be a house of lies, mainstream news organizations and commentators have often failed to give their readers a straightforward assessment of exactly what happened. August institutions, including the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, have uncovered many key facts about the scandal, but they've also repeatedly seemed to downplay the facts in a way that soft-pedaled Bankman-Fried's intent and culpability. It's now clear what happened at the FTX crypto exchange and the hedge fund Alameda Research involved a variety of conscious and intentional fraud intended to steal money from both users and investors. That's why the recent New York Times interview was widely derided for seeming to frame FTX's collapse as a result of mismanagement rather than malfeasance. A Wall Street Journal article bemoaned the loss of charitable donations from FTX. Vox co-founder Matt Iglesias, court chronicler of the neoliberal status quo, seemed to whitewash his own entanglements by crediting Bankman-Fried's money with helping Democrats in 2020. Perhaps most perniciously, many outlets have described what happened to FTX as a bank run or run on deposits, while Bankman-Fried has repeatedly insisted that the company was simply over-leveraged and disorganized. Both of these attempts to frame the fallout obfuscate the core issue, the misuse of customer funds. Malfeasance as opposed to mismanagement. And that matters if you're facing a criminal investigation, how prosecutors characterize what you did and didn't do. For more on this and other topics related to markets, pleased to be joined by John Tamny, editor of RealClearMarkets.com, director of the Center for Economic Freedom at FreedomWorks, and author of The Money Confusion, How Illiteracy About Currencies and Inflation Sets the Stage for the Crypto Revolution. John, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So what do you think of Mr. Morse's assessment over at Coinbase?
If it is about the misuse or taking of customer funds, let's put him in jail. I must say, though, I'm always a little bit skeptical of the consensus. To me, Michael Milken's the greatest capitalist who ever lived, but if you pulled most people aside on the street, they'd say, oh, yeah, he was a criminal who was imprisoned for something that they've never really been able to define.
I don't think there is consensus on SBF, though. I mean, that's his point. Was it mismanagement or intentional fraud?
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. If it's intentional fraud or the stealing, oh wow, that's inexcusable. It's unspeakable. If he ran a bad business, I'm horrified when I hear about jury trials and everything. I don't like that the government is always the winner in these scenarios, and we start putting business failures in prison. We have Elizabeth Holmes right now, who had a bunch of adult and seasoned investors believing in her, but because her technology didn't succeed quickly enough and she had to cover over that while trying to make it work, she faces prison time, and I find that horrifying.
Well, wait a second. Well, wait a second. On Elizabeth Holmes, you just said she had to cover it up. She didn't have to cover it up. She could have been forthright and said the technology isn't there, where our product is not delivering what we promised to deliver in terms of blood tests, but she didn't do that. That's fraud.
Well, I think that's a little bit debatable. She had investors who felt differently. She had businesses who wanted to work with her. She was feverishly trying to bring the technology up to speed. You try to run a business where you announce that it doesn't work and see how long your business lasts. I think we forget that just about every business founded in Silicon Valley fails. I think we forget that with any new industry, whether it was autos, whether it's internet, whether it's crypto, just about every single one's going to go under. I don't like the criminalization of it. Now, if he was actively stealing, that's something different, but I'm going to withhold judgment now. I think we need more people out there trying new things, trying to rush the future and the present, and I find it really dangerous that, well, when they fail and they fail publicly, let's get the government involved.
Well, I agree with the concern that you have, but I mean, let's establish a baseline. If you make material misrepresentations to investors, even if you're not technically stealing, that's criminal. That's a problem.
Well, and so here's where I'd be a bit more skeptical. Investors are big kids. It's well known, right or wrong. I would say it's wrong that someone like me, I can't invest in a startup like FTX. I can't invest in Theranos. Successful accredited investors can.
Right.
Why is it that government always gets to aggrandize itself in this? And so people say, well, government didn't regulate it properly. They had the ultimate kind of regulation. They had seasoned investors. The seasoned investors are well aware of what they're getting into. They understand that, again, 9 times out of 10, what they invest in is not just going to fail, but it's going to fail spectacularly. Why is this a criminal offense?
Well, so obviously you probably don't agree with the 11-year sentence that she received last week.
No, I don't. Have you read the book? Because I read it in very detailed fashion. I thought the book Bad Blood was an embarrassment. So they found a few employees who didn't like her out of thousands. Well, yeah, I think we could do that.
Yeah.
I want people trying to rush the future into the present. And investors are taking the risk there. That's why when the businesses work out, they get paid off so well. They're being paid off really well precisely because most often the business is not going to work. Now, again, I can't say for certain that Sam Bankman-Fried, maybe he's a complete fraud. this effective altruism I find nonsensical. I think running a business is the ultimate altruistic act.
Mm-hmm.
But this idea that they might put him in prison for failing, I don't like that.
Let's talk about the industry more generally because, well, you wrote a book about it. And so what do you think the impact of FTX's immolation is on crypto?
Well, it's interesting because while I wrote a book about money, that's about money specifically, that predicts that crypto private money will be the end result, and nothing has me wavering here, and here's why. Let's go back to the early 2000s. Netscape, Pets.com, Globe.com. The list of fiery internet failures is long. And that was true 100 years ago with automobiles. The fact that there's a bunch of really gruesome failures in this space isn't normally a sign that it's not going to have an impact. That's usually a sign of a maturing market, that basically they're sifting out the winners and losers. With the decline in the price of so many currencies, I don't think it's a surprise that we're seeing some blow-ups. It's, dare I say it, I wrote it in 2021 that I said, well, no crypto's for real once the coins start crashing. And I kept telling anyone who would listen that if you're buying a currency because you want to see its price go up, you really don't understand what money is, and beware of it, because you're not buying money, you're buying a speculation.
Yeah, right.
So I think the fact that this is all happening, I don't think it indicts my thesis one bit. Because I wrote about it when crypto was the darling of investing. I said, this is what's going to happen, and that's when we'll know it's for real. So I think it's still for real.
Let me ask you, this is a question from a sophisticated investor about blockchain, the underlying technology that's much talked about and much less well understood. He's got a question. Why hasn't the vaunted blockchain been able to penetrate and decimate the title insurance industry, which is broken model, not secure, title fraud and theft, too expensive? He said, I've asked a bunch of crypto heads and can't get an answer on this. And by the way, this is somebody who holds some crypto, so he's, not an antagonist ideologically, but he's wondering, why this blockchain technology that's supposed to provide answers to inefficient industries like the title insurance industry, why aren't we seeing progress there?
Well, I'll answer it with a question. I still can't get someone to give me a reasonable explanation of what blockchain is.
Okay. Well.
That's not to say that it's not for real. Let's not forget that with the internet, when PayPal came about, the vast majority of payments were still made through the U.S. mail, and so people thought the PayPal guys were nuts. Well, now it's just kind of a normal way of paying for things. But
yeah.
What makes sense to me about private money is government's just done such a horrible job with money for thousands of years, and so it strikes me that if they're private issuers of mediums of exchange, that we're going to get something more reliable, and people will start circulating them. Why hasn't it penetrated insurance? My guess is, and this is a stab in the dark, let me be clear, insurance is one of the most regulated businesses on earth. I mean, you talk about something that's just in another century, and my sense is that's a fact. It's probably harder to penetrate just because it's not a very dynamic place in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. Question about that's generally speaking. This is a piece from Andy Kessler over at the Journal. He talks about what with the blow up of FTX. A market hype cycle is winding down. It produced some good companies, but also gave us NFTs, non-fungible tokens, FTX, and SPACs. And so you gather what he's down on: FTX, SPACs, and NFTs. And I wonder if you share his sort of view that this was a hype cycle with some of these innovative vehicles, and yeah, there's going to be the creative gales of destruction, and that's all well and good, but let's understand which is substantive and which is not.
I didn't find it very compelling, and I consider Andy a friend. He's written a foreword to one of my books and everything. I didn't find it terribly compelling, however. A market cycle or a hype cycle, it presumes that there's just buyers. Well, no, there's sellers too. Someone's selling to these buyers on the way up, and it presumes that buyers have all the information and the sellers don't. But right when the market turns, the sellers have all the information, and they know when to get out ahead of all of the dumb money. I don't think it's that simple. I mean, Andy made the point that, well, FTT, which was the currency underlying FTX, they were borrowing against it, and, oh, that's a sign of market hype and stupid markets. Well, someone was lending to them, and I would presume that these are pretty sophisticated investors lending against this private currency. And so to me, what we're seeing is a growth spasm. That's the way I put it in my book. To be clear, I didn't make it up. I stole it from George Gilder, and I attribute it to him. I think with any new advance, you look at automobiles, the carnage in automobiles, the thousands of auto companies that failed once the automobile became a thing was endless. But did it destroy how we live? No, it transformed how we live. Look at all the carnage in 2000 with the internet. Same idea. So many failures. There were websites about it with really bad word names to them about all the dead internet companies. Now it's a fact of life. The fact that there's been hype about crypto probably is a signal that we've gotten a lot of good information from it that's going to transform how we live and do things. And that's a good thing. Has government been good with me? I think not. Something that could potentially replace it is something we should embrace.
John Tamny, editor of RealClearMarkets.com, director of the Center for Economic Freedom at FreedomWorks, and author of The Money Confusion, How Illiteracy About Currencies and Inflation Sets the Stage for the Crypto Revolution. John, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming